You might find yourself asking today, what happens when the most powerful leader in the world accidentally reveals a surrender disguised as a victory? And how exactly do we navigate a reality where the line between political theater and military protocol completely vanishes? Good evening. Something happened in the Oval Office today, March 31st, 2026. And I've been doing this long enough to know when a politician misspoke and when a politician revealed something. This wasn't a misstatement. This wasn't taken out of context. This was a man sitting behind the most powerful desk in the world, saying the quiet part out loud and not fully understanding what he was admitting while he said it. I want you to listen to his actual words today. Not my version, not a headline, his words. Because when you hear them, really hear them, you're going to understand exactly where this war is heading. And it isn't where you've been told. The President of the United States was surrendering. He just didn't call it that. It started with Iran. Let me tell you exactly what he said. Not the reaction to it, not the analysis of it, not what it means geopolitically or strategically or historically, just the words. Because before we get to any of that, you need to hear the words first. Trump was in the Oval Office today, reporters in the room, cameras running, and he said this: the United States will be gone or done with the war. I think we're 2 or 3 weeks in. We will leave because there's no reason for us to do this. 2 to 3 weeks, whether Iran agrees to anything or not, whether a deal is reached or not, whether the situation is resolved or not, we're leaving. And then a reporter asked him directly, does Iran have to make a deal for the United States to end its operations? Does Iran have to agree to anything? He said, no, Iran doesn't have to make a deal. He said it plainly in the Oval Office on the record, and I don't think he fully understood what he was giving away when he said it. Because here's what that means in practice. Every negotiation has leverage. Leverage is the thing that makes the other side take you seriously, the thing that keeps them at the table. And the United States just announced publicly to the entire world that it is leaving regardless, deal or no deal, progress or no progress, 2 to 3 weeks, and we're done. That isn't a negotiating position. That's an exit with a timestamp. So if you're negotiating with someone and you tell them publicly you're leaving whether they agree to anything or not, what exactly are you negotiating? I want to hear your take on this right out of the gate. Drop a comment below. Does this sound like a master negotiating tactic to you, or does it sound like a capitulation? Let me know. Now, here's where the press conference stopped being just frustrating and started being something else entirely, because Trump didn't just announce the withdrawal and leave it there. He explained it. He told reporters exactly why leaving made sense. And the explanation, the reasoning he offered in the Oval Office on the record, is worth examining very carefully. He said, Iran has no weapons. He said this: they're not putting up a fight. They're not even shooting at us. Their equipment has been totally decimated. They have nothing to shoot. They have no navy. They have no anything. They have no navy. They have no military. They have no nothing. Okay, so what are the objects appearing in the sky over Israel every week? What hit the military installation in Riyadh and destroyed some of the most advanced aircraft in the United States Air Force? What are the Shahed drones manufactured at scale, shipped across 3 countries, launched at targets across the region every single day? Those are real, documented, on record. And then in the same press conference, Trump mentioned that Iran currently controls the Strait of Hormuz. Currently controls it with no weapons, with no navy, with no military, with nothing. Donald, how does a country with no navy control one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet? How does a military with nothing keep disrupting regional shipping lanes? How does an air force that doesn't exist keep putting objects in the sky over Allied territory? He isn't describing a war he won. He's describing a war he invented. And the gap between those two things, between what he's saying and what is actually happening on the ground, that gap isn't a communication problem. That's where the actual danger lives. But let's step away from the geopolitics for a second, because here's where it gets more specific and a lot more personal. Let's bring this closer to home, because so far we've been talking about strategy and leverage in the Strait of Hormuz, and I understand that can feel distant. So let me tell you what this war costs you personally, directly. Gas hit $4 a gallon today. That isn't a coincidence. That's not a market fluctuation. That's what happens to fuel prices when there is active military conflict disrupting the region that controls a significant portion of the world's oil supply. The same region, the same strait, the one Iran apparently controls with no weapons and no navy. $4 a gallon isn't an abstraction. It's your grocery bill, your commute. Everything that moves in this country moves on fuel. Every delivery, every truck, every supply chain. $4 a gallon is a tax on everyone who isn't rich enough to not notice it. A reporter asked Trump about it directly, and he said, $4? Yeah. And we have a country that's not going to be throwing a nuclear weapon at us in 6 months. That's the trade. That's his answer. $4 a gallon, but no nuclear attack. He's telling you to be grateful that your commute costs more because at least you weren't bombed. That's the bar. Not prosperity, not stability, not a functioning economy. The bar is we weren't nuked. Congratulations, America. That's where the floor is now. That's what winning looks like in this press conference. You're paying more for everything. And the president wants credit because a nuclear warhead didn't land on your street. I want to pause here and ask you directly, how is this impacting your life right now? Are you okay with paying $4 a gallon if it means avoiding further escalation? Or do you think that is a false choice? Tell me in the comments how this is hitting your wallet. And while Americans were absorbing that answer, Iran was making a list. While that press conference was happening, while Trump was explaining that Iran has no weapons and no military and no nothing, Iran was doing something very specific. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a formal warning today. Not a rumor, not an intercepted communication, a documented public military warning, naming 18 American companies they said they would target beginning April 1st if United States strikes on Iranian leadership continued. 18 companies, including Apple, including Google, 2 companies that a combined 3 billion people interact with every single day. The IRGC put them on a list today with a start date and a condition. That isn't a threat you dismiss, that's a threat you brief. That's a threat you respond to with a national security apparatus, with intelligence assessments, with corporate coordination, with a considered governmental response. A reporter walked into the Oval Office and told the President of the United States exactly that. He said, well, what did they threaten them with? BB guns. They don't have much left to threaten. BB guns. That is the national security assessment of a formal IRGC threat against 3 billion people's daily technology infrastructure. BB guns. From the man with the nuclear codes, from the man who's been telling you for weeks that he has Iran completely under control. The contempt would be funny if the target list wasn't real, but it is real. The list exists. The date exists, the condition exists, and the President of the United States responded to all of it with a punchline. I genuinely don't know what to do with that. I genuinely don't. But honestly, that wasn't even the moment that stopped me in my tracks today. This next part, this is the one. I want to tell you about something that happened this week because it didn't get the attention it deserved. And after today, it needs to. A video went viral. United States Army. Apache helicopters, military assets, taxpayer-funded, crewed by active soldiers operating under military command, were filmed hovering over Kid Rock's house in Nashville. While Kid Rock stood inside and filmed content, a military helicopter used as a prop for a celebrity's social media post. The military commanders found out. They suspended the crews involved because there is a rule. There has always been a rule that you don't use military equipment for partisan political theater. That rule exists for a reason. It exists because the moment a military starts performing for political brands, it stops being a military and starts being something else entirely. A reporter asked Trump about it in the Oval Office today, and he said, I didn't see it, but I'm sure they had a good time. They like Kid Rock. I like Kid Rock. Maybe they were trying to defend him. Maybe they were trying to defend him from a protest with an Apache helicopter. That's the Commander-in-Chief's assessment. Not a legal review, not a military ethics consideration. I like Kid Rock, but that isn't the part that stopped me. Shortly after that press conference, shortly after the president offered his Kid Rock defense, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, issued a formal statement. I'm going to read this to you directly, every word, because this is not my characterization. This is a formal statement from the Secretary of Defense of the United States. Apache pilot suspension hereby lifted. No punishment, no investigation. Carry on, patriots. No punishment, no investigation. Carry on. The Secretary of Defense just told every soldier under his command that if you use military equipment for partisan content, if you violate military protocol for political theater, he will personally lift your suspension and call you a patriot. I don't have a measured response to that. I want to be honest with you. There's no measured response to what Hegseth did today. What he did is a corruption of the United States military in service of a political brand. Full stop. And anyone defending it should have to explain out loud exactly which principle they think that serves. The president said he likes Kid Rock. The Secretary of Defense said, carry on, patriots. And somewhere, a soldier is watching both of those men and trying to figure out what the chain of command actually means anymore now. If you have served in the military, I especially want to hear your perspective in the comments. How does it affect the ranks when a political stunt overrides protocol? Let's talk about it down below. I want to slow down right here because Trump told you today in that Oval Office to those reporters on the record that Iran is begging for a deal, that they're losing, that they're desperate, that they're coming to the table because they have no other choice. So let me tell you what Iran's foreign minister said today. Not my summary, their position exactly as stated. No ceasefire, full end to all military operations across the region, complete reparations paid to Iran. Iran keeps its ballistic missile arsenal. Iran keeps its drone capabilities. Iran retains the potential to develop nuclear weapons in the future. Iran maintains control of the Strait of Hormuz, full security guarantees for Iran, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Shiite militia groups in Iraq. And then the foreign minister said one more thing. He said the trust level with the United States is at zero. He doesn't believe negotiations will produce any results. That is their position publicly stated today. So Trump told you Iran is begging for a deal. Iran told you negotiations are pointless and their demands are non-negotiable. One of those things can be true, not both. That isn't a gray area. That's not a matter of interpretation or perspective or which news source you prefer. Those two positions cannot simultaneously exist in reality. Someone is describing a situation that does not exist. You have the list, you decide. And then, as if one press conference apparently wasn't enough, Trump signed something. And this one affects you directly, not abstractly, directly. Before we close, there is one more thing, and I need you to stay with me for this one because this is the part that affects you most directly. Not gas prices, not the Strait of Hormuz, not Apple and Google on an IRGC target list. This one, while everything else was happening in that Oval Office today, Trump signed an executive order on mail-in voting. And here's what it claims to do plainly without legal jargon. It gives the federal government access to voter rolls across states. It establishes federal criteria for who can and cannot vote by mail unilaterally through executive order, bypassing the state legislatures that the Constitution explicitly assigns authority over elections to. That isn't a minor procedural adjustment. That's the federal government inserting itself between you and your ballot. A reporter asked if he expected courts to challenge it, and he said, "I don't know how it could be challenged. You may find a rogue judge, very bad judges, but that is the only way that can be changed." A president who says his own executive orders cannot be challenged by courts isn't describing legal confidence. He's describing his relationship to the rule of law, and that relationship is, I'm not subject to it. Judges who rule against him are rogue. Courts that constrain him are corrupt. Laws that limit him are obstacles. That isn't a legal argument. That's a posture. The rules apply to everyone except me. This isn't about mail-in voting. It never was. It's about who gets to decide who votes. And right now, the answer to that question is being rewritten. What do you think is the real motive here? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you see this as a necessary security measure or a dangerous power grab? So, let me tell you what happened today. In one press conference in the Oval Office of the United States of America, the president announced he's leaving a war in 2 to 3 weeks, with no deal and no conditions. He dismissed a formal military threat to 3 billion people's technology infrastructure. He described bombing civilian bridges as an exit strategy. His Secretary of Defense told soldiers that using military equipment for political content is patriotic. And he signed an executive order claiming federal authority over who gets to vote by mail in every state in this country. All of that today, one press conference. I'm not going to tell you how to feel about that. I don't think I need to. I think you already know. But let's take a step back and look at what happens the morning after a press conference like this. While we were arguing over social media posts and digesting executive orders, the rest of the world was reacting to the vacuum we just created. Our European allies, the nations that rely entirely on the shipping lanes we just casually abandoned, held emergency security briefings before the sun even rose in Washington. They understand something fundamental that the Oval Office seems determined to ignore. When the United States signals that it will pack up and leave a strategically vital region, simply because the commander-in-chief is bored or frustrated, the entire architecture of global stability collapses. You cannot build 50 years of deterrence and then dismantle it in a 45-minute press conference without catastrophic consequences. And think about those 18 companies again, particularly the tech giants that form the backbone of our modern economy. We aren't just talking about delayed text messages or a dip in the stock market. We're talking about the infrastructure that runs our hospitals, our banking systems, our power grids. When an administration publicly mocks a credible threat to that infrastructure, calling it BB guns, they're sending a glaring green light to every state-sponsored hacker and rogue militia on the planet. They are essentially saying that American corporate and civilian targets are open season, and the federal government won't lift a finger to retaliate, let alone prevent it. The cost of that negligence won't be paid by politicians in Washington. It will be paid by everyday citizens when their data is compromised, when their savings are frozen, or when the supply chains that deliver their medicine grind to a halt. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of all this is how seamlessly the external surrender blends with the internal power grab. It isn't a coincidence that the same administration willing to hand the Strait of Hormuz to an adversary is simultaneously working to assert federal dominance over how you cast your ballot at home. They are two sides of the exact same coin, a profound disdain for the systems, alliances, and rules that govern a functioning democracy. When you tell the military that political loyalty shields them from accountability, as the Secretary of Defense did with those helicopter pilots, you are breaking the core promise of the armed forces. You're turning the military into a private security detail for a political brand. Combine that with a brazen attempt to rewrite voting laws through executive fiat, and you're looking at an administration that views accountability as an inconvenience to be eradicated. This is the reality we're waking up to. It is a reality where foreign policy is dictated by impulse, where military discipline is treated as a punchline, and where the fundamental right to vote is treated as a loophole to be closed. We're watching the real-time dismantling of American credibility, both on the world stage and right here in our own neighborhoods. The question is no longer whether the damage is being done. The damage was done the moment those words were spoken on the record. The only question left is how long it will take to rebuild what was broken in a single afternoon, and whether we will even recognize the country we're trying to rebuild. We'll keep you posted, but right now I am handing the microphone over to you. Scroll down and leave your thoughts, your frustrations, and your predictions for what comes next. Join the conversation, and let's figure this out together. Have a safe evening.